There's an almost forgotten knowledge, one that the powers that be deliberately hid from the masses, discrediting it as mere mysticism. The manual for how to shape or even bend reality itself, using what you call imagination. Neville Goddard dared to reveal that imagination is God in man, the creative power in action. The rule is simple and unsettling. When you think about what you want, nothing changes. But when you think from the deep and genuine feeling of your wish already fulfilled, the world quietly rearranges itself to match that state. At night, before you fall asleep, step into the scene, touch the impossible, see what doesn't yet exist, taste the victory. This is the secret of deliberate creation, the truth that terrifies those who control everything and everyone. Some live as spectators of their own movie, and some wake up to direct the story. They'd rather you just keep watching.
There exists a discovery capable of completely transforming the trajectory of any human being. A revelation so profound that once understood, it makes it impossible to go back to living as before. You don't possess an imagination. You are imagination clothed in human form. This is the description of your true nature. The human imagination literally constitutes God in man, the supreme creative power that shapes all observable physical reality. Every object that your eyes behold, every circumstance that you experience, every relationship that you develop, all represent crystallizations of imaginative states previously sustained. The outer world that you perceive through your physical senses functions only as a projected shadow of what you keep alive in your imaginative consciousness. Neville Goddard demonstrated through decades of practical experience that the future, although prepared in advance down to every detail, presents multiple possible outcomes. At every moment of existence, you choose which of the available futures you will experience. This choice doesn't occur through physical actions, but through the deliberate control of imagination, what he called thinking fourth-dimensionally. The fundamental difference between living as a passive reflector of external circumstances versus becoming a conscious creator of your own reality lies in a single principle: the ability to think from the desired state, not just about it. When you imaginatively dwell in the state as if it were already a present reality, that state inevitably manifests in the three-dimensional world. The practical techniques that will be revealed don't require years of esoteric preparation or complex initiations. They require only the willingness to experiment with absolute sincerity with the shaping power of the human imagination. You will discover how to fall asleep each night in the state of the wish fulfilled, how to revise past events to alter their future effects, and how to consciously occupy the many mansions available in the realm of consciousness. Prepare yourself to understand why the habit of seeing only what the senses permit makes us completely blind to what we could perceive. And most importantly, prepare yourself to discover that your imagination doesn't represent an escape from reality. It is the creative power that builds all reality. Most people live completely unaware of the creative power of imagination, invariably bowing before the dictates of facts, accepting life based exclusively on the outer world. This submission to sensory data represents humanity's fundamental prison. When someone courageously affirms the supremacy of imagination and places all things in subjection to it, they discover the supreme creative power within themselves, that power which the sacred texts call God in man. The term God in man doesn't designate an external entity that occasionally visits human consciousness. It represents precisely the human imagination functioning in its full creative capacity. Neville Goddard demonstrated that nothing under heaven resists the shaping touch of the spirit of imagination. All material substance, every apparently rigid circumstance, every supposedly sealed destiny, everything becomes as plastic as potter's clay when touched by consciously directed imagination. Observe how people desperately try to maintain contact with reality. They touch the chair with their fingers, push their feet firmly against the carpet, and grasp physical objects as if these actions could guarantee their existential security. This behavior reveals the deep fear of letting go of physical anchors and experiencing true imaginative power. The habit of seeing only what the senses permit makes them totally blind to what they could perceive beyond the sensory veil. Imagination operates independently of the natural faculties. When you deliberately cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, disentangling the mind from the evidence of the senses, and focusing attention on an invisible state, that state acquires all the distinctiveness of reality. Concentrated and sincere thought, directed toward a specific condition, automatically shuts out other sensations and makes them temporarily disappear from consciousness. To understand this power in its totality, consider the fourth-dimensional nature of existence. The three-dimensional world that you perceive through your physical senses represents only a cross-section of a broader fourth-dimensional reality. Just as a two-dimensional surface constitutes only a section of a three-dimensional solid, your apparently solid world forms only a momentary slice of a complete fourth-dimensional structure. Time functions as the fourth dimension, not as an abstract line, but as a concrete medium where all changes occur. Your fourth-dimensional self contains all the moments of your existence, from birth to death, coexisting simultaneously. When you meet another person, you encounter only a cross-section of their complete fourth-dimensional being, the present moment that your senses can grasp. Spiritual vision perceives the complete content of time, while natural vision confines reality to the moment called now, treating past and future as purely imaginary. Spiritual vision sees distinct and separate events as objects in space. What seems mental and subjective to the natural man becomes concrete and objective to the spiritual man. The ancient masters distinguished these two modes of perception as carnal mind and mind of Christ. The carnal mind remains governed by the senses, confined to ordinary waking consciousness. The mind of Christ operates through controlled imagination, governed by desire. Paul captured this fundamental distinction. The natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, nor can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. This difference doesn't represent degrees of moral evolution, but radically different modes of processing reality. This understanding radically transforms your relationship with imagination. You're not fantasizing when you imagine, you're accessing real dimensions of existence that transcend limited sensory perception. Each imaginative state that you sustain with conviction represents a real location in fourth-dimensional space, as concrete as any physical place you could visit. Fundamental changes always occur first in consciousness. The future, although prepared in advance down to every detail, offers multiple possible trajectories. At every moment, you select which of the available futures you'll experience through the state of consciousness you choose to occupy. Your assumptions, even those considered insignificant, produce considerable effects in the fabric of reality. The fundamental concept upon which all experiences are based consists of your conception of yourself. You act as you act and have the experiences you have because your self-concept determines these manifestations. Change your conception of yourself and you automatically change your future. This reciprocal change operates in both directions, modifying any term in the future series of experiences correspondingly alters your self-perception. Blaise Pascal, the 17th century French mathematician and philosopher, captured this truth in his Pensées when he stated, "You would not have sought me if you had not already found me." This statement, originally referring to humanity's search for the divine, reveals an operational principle of imagination. The desire for any specific state indicates that this state already exists as a present possibility in the fourth-dimensional structure of reality. Pascal understood that the search arises only when what is sought has already touched consciousness at some level. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man through the language of desire. Each genuine desire functions as consciousness of something necessary to make life more complete. The key to progress and the realization of dreams lies in immediate obedience to this inner voice, obedience that manifests as instant assumption of the wish fulfilled. The absolute plasticity of reality under the imaginative touch reveals itself progressively to those who practice consistently. Assumptions awaken what they affirm. As soon as you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, your fourth-dimensional self finds paths for its realization, discovers methods for its achievement that the three-dimensional mind could never conceive. With its expanded vision, the fourth-dimensional self constructs the necessary means to materialize the accepted end. The discovery of this power marks a point of no return in conscious evolution. Those who truly understand that human imagination constitutes the divine creative power can never again live as mere passive reflectors of circumstances. They become active participants in the continuous creation of reality, consciously shaping events before they crystallize in the three-dimensional world. Imagination serves as the vehicle through which you navigate between possible states, selecting which you'll occupy and, consequently, which you'll experience as concrete physical reality. Precision in applying creative imagination begins with absolute clarity about what you desire in this world. Without an exact definition of the objective, imagination disperses in multiple directions, weakening its shaping power. When you know exactly what you want, you construct the most vivid representation possible of what you would see, touch, and do if you were physically present in that desired state. Neville Goddard developed a specific technique that maximizes the transformative power of imagination. This technique exploits the borderline state between waking and sleeping, that peculiar moment where the conscious mind still maintains directional control, but the critical barriers of the intellect begin to dissolve. In this liminal state, imagination operates with maximum potency. At night, when you lie down, you deliberately enter this drowsy state that borders on sleep. Physical immobilization plays a crucial role in this process. The body needs to be completely relaxed, preferably lying down or comfortably reclined. This physical immobility, combined with controlled drowsiness, creates the ideal conditions for conscious projection into the desired state. Consider the specific example of someone who desires a particular house. The technique doesn't consist of visualizing yourself observing the house from afar, like a distant spectator admiring a photograph. You must imaginatively dwell within the house. When you mentally get out of bed, your feet touch the specific floor of that desired house. You feel the texture of the floor, polished wood, soft carpet, cold ceramic. Each sensation needs to register with absolute clarity. Upon leaving the imaginary bedroom, you enter the adjacent room. Your hands touch the doorknob, feeling the cold and solid metal. You perceive the subtle resistance of the hinge as you open the door. The hallway extends before you with specific dimensions. Light enters the room through the windows at specific angles. Each architectural detail exists with complete sensory concreteness. The imaginary furniture possesses real substance under your mental touch. You run your hand over the smooth surface of the table, feel the soft upholstery of the sofa when you sit down, and perceive the weight of your own body sinking into the cushions. Complete sensory vividness transforms the imaginative experience into a psychological reality indistinguishable from physical experience. While maintaining this experience with total intensity, you fall deeply asleep within the state. Sleep carries the final impression of waking consciousness into the depths of the subconscious, where it operates without interference from the critical intellect. During sleep, your fourth-dimensional self works on building bridges between the imagined state and its three-dimensional manifestation. The realization of the objective occurs through a series of events that you couldn't consciously conceive or plan. The means employed arise with organic naturalness, as if spontaneously sprouting from circumstances. People appear to offer exactly what you need. Opportunities arise at the perfect moment. Previously closed doors open without apparent effort. This naturalness of the manifestation process frequently deceives the unprepared observer. After realization, you might think that the events would have happened anyway, such is the fluidity with which they unfold. The intellect, unable to trace the connection between the imaginative work and the physical result, attributes everything to coincidence or luck. The difference between success and failure in this technique lies in the quality of imaginative participation. Visualizing yourself from a distance, as if observing yourself on a movie screen, produces weak or null results. You must feel yourself in the action, here and now. The distinction becomes clear through a simple experiment. First, visualize yourself climbing a ladder as if observing another person executing the action. Then, with your eyes closed, imagine a ladder directly in front of you and feel yourself actually climbing each step. The first experience remains abstract, distant, without magnetic force. The second experience engages your entire being, creating subtle muscular sensations, alterations in perceived balance, and changes in imaginary visual perspective. This complete sensory participation distinguishes creative imagination from mere mental fantasy. The technique establishes the importance of restricting the imaginary action to a single condensed act, repeating it continuously until it acquires the feeling of absolute reality. Without this discipline, attention wanders through associative trails, taking consciousness hundreds of miles away in space and years in time. If you decide to climb a particular ladder because this act implies the realization of the desire, you must keep your attention fixed exclusively on this specific action. Drowsiness facilitates the shift because it favors effortless attention, but it shouldn't progress to premature deep sleep, where you lose control over the direction of your thoughts. The moderate degree of drowsiness allows you to direct thoughts while keeping critical faculties sufficiently relaxed to accept the reality of the imaginative experience. An effective variation of the technique involves repeating a short phrase that implies the realization of the desire. In a relaxed and drowsy state, you continuously repeat like a lullaby something simple like "thank you," mentally addressing the higher power for having fulfilled the desire. The monotony of repetition, combined with the feeling of gratitude for the desire already fulfilled, imprints the conviction in the depths of the subconscious mind. The fundamental principle remains constant: to experience in imagination, with all the distinctiveness of reality, what would be experienced in the flesh if the objective were achieved. This experience of the desired end automatically determines the means for its realization. The difference between failure and success in applying creative imagination lies in a fundamental distinction that escapes most people. The radical difference between thinking about what you want versus thinking from what you want. This distinction establishes two completely different operational modes of human consciousness. Thinking about a desired state keeps you as an external observer, contemplating distant possibilities. You remain anchored in your current position, looking across the chasm of separation at something that exists out there in the future or in space. This form of thought, although common, completely lacks transformative power. Millions daily think about wealth while remaining in poverty, think about health while continuing sick, and think about ideal relationships while experiencing loneliness. Thinking from a state transports your consciousness into it. You don't observe the desired state, you inhabit it. Your imagination places you inwardly in direct contact with the world of states of consciousness. These states exist now, are present at this exact moment, but remain mere abstract possibilities while you only think about them. They become overwhelmingly real when you think from them and dwell in them with total conviction. Neville Goddard illustrated this principle through a penetrating observation. What the world looks like depends entirely on where you are when you make your observation. The same city viewed from the valley looks completely different when viewed from the mountaintop. Perspective determines perception. Similarly, when you describe your world, and that description naturally relates to the point in space that you imagine you're occupying, then you are there, not physically yet, but imaginatively, and your imagination represents your true self. Consider the practical difference. Someone thinking about being rich imagines themselves in the future with money, visualizes full bank accounts, and dreams of luxurious purchases. But they remain firmly planted in their current consciousness of financial limitation. Each thought carries the implicit subtext: I, who am poor, imagine what it would be like to be rich. The separation remains intact. Someone who thinks from wealth mentally inhabits the state of prosperity now. When looking at the world, they see it through the eyes of someone financially secure. The worries that would dominate someone in financial difficulties simply don't arise. Decisions flow naturally from the consciousness of abundance. There's no effort to believe in wealth. Wealth constitutes the current point of observation. This shift in imaginative perspective produces automatic behavioral transformations. When you truly think from a state, your reactions, choices, and even your body language spontaneously align with that state. You don't need to consciously modify your behaviors. They emerge naturally from the new conscious position occupied. The physical world responds to this inner shift with mathematical precision. Where you go in imagination and make real through persistent dwelling, there you will also go in the flesh. External events reorganize themselves to correspond to the internal reality that you've established. People, circumstances, and opportunities appear in perfect synchrony with the conscious state inhabited. The trap that captures countless aspirants arises from the tendency to oscillate between the two modes. They momentarily manage to think from the desired state, but at the first challenge, they immediately return to thinking about it. This oscillation cancels the imaginative work, creating a pattern of advances and retreats that keeps the person essentially in the same place. Mastery requires constant vigilance over the mental point of observation. When you detect that you've slipped back to thinking about the desired state, you must immediately reposition yourself within it. This continuous readjustment gradually establishes the new state as your natural mental dwelling. With persistent practice, it becomes harder to return to the old state than to remain in the new one. Neville emphasized that experiencing in imagination what would be experienced in physical realization represents only half of the equation. The other essential half consists of having this experience from the state, not as an observer of it. You must wear the state as you would wear clothes, inhabit it as you would inhabit a house, and breathe it as you would breathe a specific atmosphere. The operational secret lies in first determining, how would I feel if my desire were realized now? Not tomorrow, not in the distant future, but now. Then, without trying to rationalize or justify, you simply assume that feeling. You think, perceive, react, and move through the world from that established feeling. Practice reveals a surprising truth. Consistently thinking from any state makes it impossible not to experience it physically. Imagination, when properly focused and sustained in a specific perspective, possesses absolute power over external conditions. The outer world invariably conforms to the inner world, consistently maintained. This understanding dissolves the apparent solidity of current circumstances. They represent only crystallizations of previously inhabited conscious states. Change the inner state from which you think and perceive, and the outer circumstances must inevitably follow. Physical reality operates as a faithful shadow of established imaginative reality. The events of the day don't end when the day ends. They remain psychologically active, radiating influences that shape the coming days. Each experience recorded in consciousness functions as a seed that will germinate into similar future experiences, unless you intervene through imaginative revision. This healthy and productive daily exercise allows you to retroactively rewrite the impressions left by events, thus altering their future consequences. The difference between the technique of falling asleep in the desired state and the nightly revision reveals itself as fundamental. While the first constructs futures not yet experienced, revision reconstructs pasts already lived. You're not creating something new. You're replacing impressions already crystallized in memory with deliberately chosen impressions. The psychological past, unlike the chronological past, remains perpetually malleable. People unaware of this power fall asleep at the end of the day, tired and exhausted, accepting as final all the events that occurred. Each professional rejection, each hostile message, each frustrating result consolidates as an additional brick in the prison of apparent determinism. They carry into sleep, and consequently into the subconscious, the raw impressions of the day, allowing these to dictate the pattern of future days. Systematic revision operates through a revolutionary principle. You relive the day as you would have liked to have lived it, mentally revising the scenes to conform them to your ideals. The rejection email transforms into enthusiastic approval. The tense video call converts into productive collaboration. The disappointing bank notification changes to the desired amount. You're not denying what occurred. You're overwriting its psychological impression. The only absolutely essential requirement: awakening your attention with such force that you become totally absorbed in the revised action. The reconstructed scene needs to become more vivid and emotionally charged than the original event. This intensity allows the new version to literally replace the original impression in the subconscious records. Neville discovered through systematic experimentation that the subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between memories of physical events and memories of events imagined with sufficient vividness. This discovery possesses extraordinary implications. The past that you carry psychologically doesn't need to correspond to the past that you physically experienced. The impressions that determine your future can be consciously chosen through imaginative revision. The mechanics of this substitution operate through the alteration of the state of consciousness. When you consistently revise, you're not just changing your attitude, you're altering the state of consciousness in which you operate. Each revised event reconstructs your identity at the most fundamental level. The person who experienced rejection becomes, through revision, someone who experienced acceptance. This identity shift determines future experiences more powerfully than any external action. The phenomenon extends beyond individual psychology. After weeks of consistent revision, objective changes manifest in the behavior of others. Previously hostile colleagues become inexplicably collaborative. Chronic problem patterns dissolve without apparent cause. The very causal fabric of reality reorganizes itself, as if the revised past had always been the real past. This apparent violation of linear causality reveals the fourth-dimensional nature of existence. In fourth-dimensional space, all moments coexist simultaneously. When you revise a past event with sufficient intensity, you're literally accessing and modifying that point in the temporal continuum. The change propagates through the temporal structure, altering not just subjective impressions, but the very trajectory of events. The moment before falling asleep offers ideal conditions for this practice. In that borderline state between waking and sleeping, the critical mind relaxes its vigilance, allowing revisions to penetrate the subconscious without resistance. You fall asleep not as a victim of the day's events, but as the conscious author of your own narrative. Daily revision represents more than a psychological technique. It constitutes an exercise in temporal sovereignty. You demonstrate that the creative power of imagination operates bidirectionally in time, not only projecting futures, but reconstructing pasts. This practice develops the imaginative musculature essential for all conscious manifestation. William Blake understood this truth when he declared that we carry our heaven and earth in our own breast. The outer world, although it seems solid and determined, represents only the shadow of the inner world that is continuously maintained. Through conscious revision, you reconstruct this inner world retrospectively, freeing yourself from the apparent determinism of circumstances that have already occurred. Mastery of this technique reveals that you're never trapped by the effects of past experiences. Each night offers an opportunity to rewrite the script of the day, altering its future consequences. The past becomes as malleable as the future for those who understand and apply the reconstructive power of imagination. John 14 contains one of the most misunderstood and simultaneously most practical revelations of all spiritual literature. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. The central character of the Gospels represents the human imagination in its creative function. The mansions don't designate places in some heavenly post-death dwelling, but states of consciousness available now for imaginative occupation. Each desire that arises in your consciousness corresponds to a specific mansion in the fourth-dimensional structure of reality. The desire for prosperity represents a mansion. The desire for a loving relationship, another mansion. The desire for vibrant health, yet another. These mansions don't exist in a distant future or in an inaccessible dimension. They exist now, present, awaiting only your decision to occupy them through persistent imagination centered on the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The preparation of the place mentioned in the verse precisely describes the imaginative work. When you make a vivid representation of the desired state, enter that state through imagination, and remain in it with conviction, you're preparing that place for physical habitation. The promise, I will come again and receive you unto myself, refers to the inevitable moment when outer reality conforms to the consistently maintained inner state. The Song of Solomon provides even more explicit technical instruction through poetic language. By night on my bed, I sought him whom my soul loveth. I found him whom my soul loveth, and would not let him go until I had brought him into my mother's house, and into the chamber of her that conceived me. Translating for modern practical application, while you rest in your physical bed, your consciousness seeks and finds the desired state. Having found that state through vivid imagination, you don't let it go. You keep that mood alive, sustain that feeling, and in that state you fall asleep, taking it into the chamber of her that conceived you, the creative subconscious. The multiplicity of available mansions reveals the unlimited breadth of possible experiences. You're not restricted to a few predetermined options. Each nuance of experience that you can conceive represents a distinct state, a specific mansion in the infinite house of consciousness. The successful entrepreneur inhabits a different mansion from the fulfilled artist, who inhabits a different mansion from the victorious athlete. Within each category exist infinite gradations and combinations. Navigation between these mansions occurs instantaneously through imagination. There's no distance to travel or travel time to consider. The moment you assume the feeling of inhabiting a particular state, you're there. The change occurs at the speed of consciousness. The challenge doesn't lie in reaching the state, but in remaining in it with sufficient consistency for it to materialize. States of consciousness possess specific magnetic characteristics. Each state attracts experiences, people, and circumstances that harmonize with its particular frequency. When you inhabit the state of prosperity, lucrative opportunities arise naturally. When you occupy the state of realized love, harmonious relationships manifest. The state functions as an invisible magnet, reorganizing the field of possibilities around you. The understanding that all states exist simultaneously in the present dissolves the illusion of temporal limitation. You don't need to gradually evolve to deserve to occupy a particular state. There are no external prerequisites, necessary qualifications, or permissions to obtain. The only requirement consists of your willingness to assume the feeling of the state as present reality and maintain it with persistence. Neville emphasized that our ability to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled determines our ability to live a more abundant life. Most people fear imagining themselves as important and noble individuals, secure in their contribution to the world. At the exact moment such an assumption begins, reason and the senses vehemently deny its truth. The contrast between the imagined state and visible circumstances generates intense psychological discomfort. This discomfort arises from the unconscious impulse to desperately cling to the familiar world of known things. You instinctively resist everything that threatens to tear you from familiar and apparently secure anchors, but these anchors that seem to offer security constitute precisely the chains that prevent movement toward higher states of realization. Successful occupation of a new mansion requires psychological courage. You must be willing to let go of the old identity while the new one hasn't yet materialized visibly. This intermediate period, in which you internally maintain a state that the senses still deny, tests the strength of your imaginative conviction. Those who persist during this period discover that outer reality inevitably reorganizes itself to correspond to the maintained inner state. The architecture of the many mansions reveals that limitation and abundance, disease and health, loneliness and love, failure and success, all coexist as present possibilities in the structure of consciousness. You select which you experience through the imaginative choice of which mansion to inhabit. The world you perceive simply faithfully mirrors the mansion from which you observe. People totally unaware of the fantastic power of imagination live as mere reflectors of life. They react to events, respond to circumstances, and adapt to conditions, always operating based on what the outer world presents. This reactive existence characterizes the experience of the vast majority, who spend entire decades without discovering that they possess the power to actively affect reality instead of just reflecting it. When you begin to discover this power within yourself, you cross a portal of no return. You can never again play the previous role of passive victim of circumstances. The transformation from reflector to effector marks a fundamental evolutionary shift in human consciousness. From here on, you don't just respond to life, you deliberately shape it through the conscious use of creative imagination. The operational secret of this transformation reveals itself with crystal clarity. Center your imagination on the feeling of the wish fulfilled and remain there. This instruction, apparently simple, contains all the technology necessary to reshape any aspect of human experience. Our ability to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not near it, not thinking about it, but dwelling within it, determines our ability to live a more abundant life. Most people deeply fear imagining themselves as important and noble individuals, secure in their contribution to the world. This fear arises from deep conditioning that equates elevated imagination with dangerous delusion. At the exact moment such imaginative assumption begins, reason and the senses rise up in violent protest, denying the truth of the assumption. "Who do you think you are?" whispers the voice of conditioning. "Look at the evidence," scream the senses. You experience an overwhelming unconscious impulse to desperately cling to the world of familiar things. The apparently secure anchors of the known exert a powerful gravitational pull, resisting any attempt to transcend them. This impulse to return to the familiar constitutes the main obstacle between mediocre life and extraordinary life. Persistent imagination centered on the feeling of the wish fulfilled constitutes the secret of all successful operations. Only this fulfills the intention. Each stage of human progress, from the discovery of fire to space exploration, occurred through the conscious and voluntary exercise of imagination. Someone imagined what didn't yet exist, maintained that image with persistence, and reality reorganized itself to correspond to the sustained vision. Those who persist in this practice eventually achieve vision in the inner world. They directly perceive that the outer world, although it seems solid and independent, functions only as a projection of the inner imaginative world. The circumstances that seem to cause their experiences reveal themselves as effects of previously assumed conscious states. The apparent determinism of the physical world dissolves in the perception of absolute malleability under the imaginative touch. William Blake, who dedicated his life to exploring and documenting the powers of imagination, proclaimed this fundamental truth. In your own bosom you bear your heaven and earth, and all you behold, though it appears without, it is within, in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. Blake describes the operational structure of reality. This understanding completely inverts conventional life strategy. Instead of struggling to modify external circumstances through direct physical effort, you learn to alter them through the modification of internal imaginative states. The real work happens in consciousness. External manifestation follows automatically, as inevitably as the shadow follows the object that projects it. Experiment, and you too will see that your imagination is the creator. Don't accept these words as doctrine. Test them as a scientist would test a hypothesis. Select a specific desire. Clearly construct the state of the wish fulfilled. Enter that state through vivid imagination. Remain there with persistence, always returning when the senses try to drag you back to the old state. Observe how reality reorganizes itself to correspond to the maintained inner state. The transformation from reflector to effector isn't limited to a personal psychological change. You become a conscious participant in the continuous creation of reality. Each imaginative state that you sustain adds something to the world. Each revision that you perform alters the fabric of what's possible. You discover that you were always a co-creator. You were just operating unconsciously. Now, you operate with knowledge and deliberation. The power was always present, awaiting only your recognition and conscious use. The human imagination literally constitutes the workshop where all futures are forged. Those who understand this and apply it with persistence find themselves living in a radically different world, not because they changed worlds, but because they changed the point of consciousness from which the world is perpetually created. All change begins with understanding your role as co-creator, and the only way to connect with this divine intelligence is through meditation. We've developed a set of audio tools to help you access this higher state of consciousness. To learn more and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me."